My sister humiliated my daughter with a cruel gift bag. But the next morning, my silence unleashed a truth that made her beg for forgiveness. The birthday party was held in my sister's backyard, a modern farmhouse on the outskirts of Austin, strung with twinkling lights through every tree branch and a long table draped in white lace decorated like something out of a wedding magazine. My twin nieces, Harper and Lily, had just turned 8. They wore identical shimmery pink sequin dresses, their hair in fishtail braids with bows as big as their hands. The place was packed, full of familiar faces I hadn't seen in ages, mostly for good reason. I held my daughter Ellie's hand as we stepped into that crowded garden. She had just turned 7 and had picked out a sparkly blue headband that morning because she said it looked like a smiling star. Ellie was shy, never fully at ease in crowds, and I felt her little shoulders tense as we walked in. But she had practiced saying happy birthday all the way there and had even made 2 handmade cards with drawings of suns and rainbows. I told myself just having the courage to show up was already a victory. I spotted my sister Abigail in the center of it all, laughing loudly, a glass of champagne sparkling in her hand. When our eyes met, she gave a slight nod before turning away like I was a late-arriving housekeeper. My mom gave me that tight-lipped smile she always used to say, "Don't make a scene." My dad didn't even look up from his plate of sandwiches, as if the cold cut in his hand was the most important thing in the world. The gift bag handout happened right after the candle blowing. Each child was called up to receive a glittery fabric tote bag, their names written in sparkly cursive. I caught glimpses of the gifts inside. Mini stuffed animals, handmade bracelets, imported lollipops, personalized water bottles with their initials. The delighted squeals sounded like a second Christmas. Then came Ellie's turn. An adult, probably one of my sister's friends, handed her a small, crumpled white paper bag. No decorations, just a crooked yellow sticky note on the front scribbled in black marker. "Try harder next time." I saw Ellie pause. She looked at the bag like she was trying to misread it, like it had to be a joke, but no friendly laughter followed. She opened the bag slowly, as if still hoping there was something kind inside. A broken pencil, a discolored mint, and a dirty gray eraser. Nothing else. No note, no explanation. She turned to me, her eyes were shining, her hands squeezing mine. I knew that feeling, that gut-level confusion, that sense of having done something wrong without knowing what. I heard Abigail burst out laughing, that sharp-edged laugh she used when she thought she was being funny. "She's been a little extra lately," she said, like telling a joke. Crying, interrupting, too sensitive about little things. This was just a gentle reminder. My mom chuckled along. "Honestly, it's good for her, Nancy. You baby her too much." My dad grunted like it was all just a dumb play he was being forced to sit through. Brarky." I looked down at Ellie. She was trying to smile. That twisted kind of smile kids use when they're trying to hold in tears. No one else in that crowd seemed to notice. Or worse, they noticed and still chose to laugh. Jason, my husband, was standing beside me. He didn't say a word, just gently took the bag from Ellie's hands and said, voice low but steady, "Let's go get you a real treat." We took Ellie's hands and walked out of that party quietly, but with purpose, like people leaving a house that was already smoldering. No one stopped us. No one called out. Not even Abigail bothered to turn her head. And I understood. This wasn't a party anymore. This was a warning and a final line. On the drive home, Ellie sat silently in the back seat, hugging the torn white bag like she was still trying to figure out what had just happened. I caught Jason's eyes in the rearview mirror, calm, but stormy. No one spoke. Even the car radio had been turned off at some point, leaving space for a strange kind of silence. Not uncomfortable, just like the 3 of us were all holding our breath, waiting for something to break. When we got home, Ellie didn't run to her room like she usually did. She placed the gift bag on the table, pulled off the sparkly headband, and climbed onto the couch, curling up under the thin Thanksgiving throw Jason had given her last year. She was still holding the 2 crayon-colored cards. The stars she'd drawn looked smudged now, like they were melting into each other. "Was it because I forgot to say thank you?" Ellie asked, her voice barely a breath, eyes still on the card. "Brr." I felt my heart tighten. I sat beside her, gently touching her hand. "No, Ellie, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't because you forgot anything." I paused to make sure my voice was clear, firm. Some people forget how to be kind, and that has nothing to do with you. She nodded, barely. Eber. Then she pulled the card to her chest like it was a paper shield. But if I had drawn it better, maybe they would have liked it more. I wanted to say something strong, something that would make it all better, that love isn't something you should have to earn. But I couldn't find the words that felt right. I just pulled her into my arms and held her tight, as if I could block out every careless word that had ever been thrown at her heart. When Ellie drifted off to sleep in my arms, Jason came in with 2 mugs of hot tea. He sat across from me, thoughtful. This, he said, wasn't about a paper bag. I nodded. I know. How many times has it been now? He asked, not needing an answer. The time you brought pie to Thanksgiving and your mom said it was too salty. The time your sister said Ellie dressed weird. The time your dad told her to toughen up instead of crying at loud noises. I sighed. I used to hope they'd change for Ellie. I thought if I was patient enough, kind enough, one day they'd see her for who she really is. Ibershi, Jason set his mug down. They don't. They don't want to, because if they see Ellie, they'd have to admit they were wrong about how they treated you. I looked back at my daughter, sleeping soundly, still holding her card like it was a dream she didn't want to let go. I can't let this happen again. Jason said nothing, but I saw him nod, not in permission, but in silent agreement, like a vow. I stood up and walked to the drawer in my home office, the one where I kept temporary things I once thought I'd deal with someday, the utility bills I paid for my parents when they forgot, the texts from my sister asking me to watch the twins so she could take a week off from the stress, the promise to pay me back for the roof repairs after the storm that still hung in the air. I had printed it all out neatly organized in a nameless folder. Quietly, I opened the lid, pulled out a blank page and a marker. I wrote slowly, deliberately, not to threaten or punish, but to record the truth. In the top right corner, I taped the wrinkled yellow sticky note, the one from Ellie's gift bag. The words, "Try harder next time," still visible, still tilted like a smirk. Jason walked in and saw me placing it on the first page of the folder. He said nothing. Then he rested a hand on my shoulder. "This time, we're not going back, okay?" I squeezed his hand. "No more times." Aber. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat beside Ellie's bed, listening to her steady breaths. In the dark, I thought of all the times I'd stayed quiet, all the times I was told I was too sensitive, too demanding, overreacting, and I swallowed it, afraid of making things worse. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about Ellie, and Ellie deserved a different beginning. Tomorrow, I'd start clearing things out, both the house and my heart. But tonight, I just sat there keeping watch over her peaceful sleep and whispered a promise. No one will hurt her again, not as long as I still have breath in my chest. I grew up in a 4-bedroom house with 3 witnesses to the fact that I was always the one left out. My sister Abigail was the kind of child parents build their hopes on and repeat like a tired refrain. Straight-A student, hair always neat, knew how to talk to adults, and never made a fuss. Every word, every move she made was met with warm smiles and gentle pats on the back. And me, the child who asked too many whys, got distracted easily, and never quite learned how to please a crowd, was often left out of the frame. I remember back in 3rd grade when my teacher chose me as the inspiration of the month for helping a classmate learn to read. I ran home with the certificate, still smelling of fresh ink. My mom picked it up, glanced at it, and said, "Your sister was chosen 3 months in a row. But congratulations." Then she turned back to finish her favorite TV drama. There was no cake, no text in the family group chat like the ones that always showed up whenever Abigail won a school debate competition. When I started drawing, though I wasn't very good, I really loved it. My dad said, "You should do something more practical, like your sister studying finance. Art doesn't put food on the table." My sketches slowly ended up in my desk drawer, collecting dust, and eventually even I forgot about them. I used to think I was just too sensitive. I blamed myself for feeling left out, for feeling compared. I tried to do everything right, kept my room clean, finished homework before dinner, never needed to be asked twice, but it was never enough. I was still the one stuck in the front seat whenever we went on family trips because the better seats were for Abigail. She gets car sick easily. I was still the one who had to give up my favorite food because your sister really enjoys that dish. My feelings were never seen as valid. When I cried after my best friend turned her back on me, my mom said, "What did you do to upset her? Don't overcomplicate things." When I said I felt sad for no reason, she sighed. Kids these days always think something's wrong just to get attention. No one ever asked why I was sad. They just wanted me to stop so they wouldn't be bothered. I grew up believing that love was something to be earned, that I was only worth caring about when I wasn't a burden, when I did everything right, and if I ever felt hurt, it was my fault for being too sensitive. It wasn't until college, when I finally got out of that thick atmosphere, that I realized not all families are like that. I met Jason my senior year. He was the first person who really listened without interrupting or brushing me off with empty advice. The first time I cried because I missed home, even though I couldn't think of a single thing I missed, he simply rested his hand on my back saying nothing. He didn't need to. The first time Jason met my family, he stayed quiet through the entire dinner. Then once we got in the car, he said, "I get it. I didn't have to explain." The way my mom asked all about Abigail's work but forgot to ask what I did. The way my dad bragged to Jason about his successful daughter without ever looking in my direction. He saw everything. And then Ellie came along. Her arrival made me believe I could change things. I wanted her to have what I never did, a full family, holiday gatherings, memories with grandparents, aunts, and uncles. I forgave my mom, my dad, Abigail, or at least tried to set aside the hurt so Ellie wouldn't miss out. I ignored the sarcastic comments about my parenting, her outfit choices, the way she didn't like being hugged. I brushed off the times Ellie looked at me with wide eyes and asked, "Mom, why does Grandma shake her head like that when I talk?" I kept telling myself, if I'm patient enough, kind enough, they'll come to accept Ellie, love her, change, until that day. The gift bag with the yellow note, Ellie's strained smile, Abigail's gleeful laugh, and I realized I was wrong. The pattern didn't start with Ellie. It started with me. And if I did nothing, it wouldn't stop with her. That wasn't just a party. It was a perfect reenactment of what I'd lived through, only this time it pierced right through my daughter's heart. I started noticing something wasn't right when Ellie was 4. It began with what seemed like harmless remarks, like when she wore a purple star print dress to a classmate's birthday. "Not the kind of dress a little girl should wear," my mom said flatly when she saw the photo I posted. Abigail texted with a smirking emoji, "Let's hope she doesn't think fashion is her thing." I laughed it off, typed, "Kids have their own style," and scrolled past it, telling myself I was overreacting. But the small comments started to pile up. Her. I remember once when Ellie didn't want to hug her grandpa during a holiday visit. She pulled her hand back, hiding behind me, quietly saying, "I don't want to be touched." My mom frowned and said loudly in front of everyone, "Kids these days are so rude. Who's going to love her acting like that?" Abigail burst out laughing. "Guess she takes after her mom. So emotional and loves controlling people." I spoke up gently, explained that Ellie had sensitivity to physical touch and needed her boundaries respected. My parents just looked confused and irritated. "You're teaching her to reject basic manners," my dad said with a tone like it was absolute truth. I tried to explain how Ellie reacts to loud sounds, how she needs time to adjust to new people, that this was part of how she experiences the world, but no one listened. Every time I set a boundary to protect her, I got labeled again overprotective. Snowplow mom, too intense. One Christmas gathering, Abigail put a loud toy right in front of Ellie, one I'd specifically asked not to bring. Ellie startled, covered her ears, and burst into tears. Instead of apologizing, Abigail stared at me and shrugged. "This is called real-world training. Life doesn't come with a volume control." I held Ellie close, feeling her whole body shake. As I carried her out of the living room, I heard my mother whisper behind me. "She always overreacts to everything." I don't remember how many times I've left that house with Ellie in my arms and my chest tight, but I remember the familiar feeling just like when I was called complicated, too emotional, uncontrollable. Only now it was my daughter. I used to think I was strong enough to endure it, wise enough to separate past from present, but I was wrong. The way they treated me is now being replayed with Ellie. Different name, same script, and like me back then, Ellie has started to learn how to shrink herself. Stay quiet. Wait for the right moment to speak. One afternoon when Ellie was 6, she brought home a watercolor painting, soft spirals and purples and blues blending together. I asked, "What did you paint?" She said, "I painted my feelings." Because I don't know how to say them. I froze. I saw myself in that answer. A child who once had to draw emotions because no one gave her permission to speak them. That night, I called Abigail. I tried to stay calm, explained that the teasing was affecting Ellie, that she needed to be treated with respect. The reply I got was a dry laugh. "Auntie, are you serious? If kids can't handle a few comments, how are they going to survive life? Stop projecting your feelings onto your daughter." I hung up. Jason was next to me, eyes still on his laptop, but his voice low and steady. "How many times have they told you you're imagining the problem?" I didn't answer. I was thinking of Ellie. What kind of person she'd become if I kept letting her be pulled into this cycle. I knew the question would come. Is it worth cutting ties? Keeping your child away from her grandparents, her relatives. I used to be afraid that if I did, Ellie would lose part of her family. But now I see more clearly than ever. Family isn't the people who make her shrink herself to fit their expectations. Family is where she can be herself without fear of being laughed at or corrected. And if I have to choose between keeping the peace in a toxic family or protecting the wholeness of my daughter's spirit, I won't hesitate. The morning after the birthday party, I got up earlier than usual, even though I hadn't slept much at all. The first light crept through the window, streaking across the wooden floor, soft and quiet, as if to remind me today would be different, not because of what was coming, but because of what I was ending. Jason sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, his eyes still foggy. But when I set the thick brown folder on the table, he glanced at it and nodded like he'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Where do we start?" he asked. I opened the folder, flipping through the pages. Each one was a memory I had once dismissed, tried to forget, or told myself wasn't a big deal. There were screenshots of texts from Abigail asking if I could help pay for her car repairs because my paychecks messed up this month. A quick thank you followed. No repayment. An email from my mom last year about their utilities being shut off because of a billing error and asking me to cover actually the 4th time in 2 years. Even a bill with my name on the internet service at my parents' house even though I moved out when I was still single. I'd even printed excerpts from old journal entries about family gatherings where Ellie was mocked, where I was scolded just for not toughening her up. I organized them into sections. Finances, hurtful words, emotional neglect, repeating patterns of harm. Then I clipped each one, labeled them clearly. Finally, I stuck a yellow sticky note on the cover. No long explanation, just 3 words. That's enough. Jason printed 3 copies. One stayed with us, one would go to Abigail, the last I planned to send to Aunt Margaret, the only relative who ever opened her heart to me. She once told me, "Some silences are a kind of complicity." I knew she'd understand. That afternoon, I drove to Abigail's neighborhood, a quiet little suburb in Fort Worth, where she moved after I helped cover most of the down payment. I once thought helping her would keep our fragile connection alive. Now I knew I'd only prolonged a wound that never healed. I didn't ring the bell. I simply placed the envelope squarely at her doorstep, then stepped back a few paces. Jason waited in the car. I looked at the house one last time, the porch full of potted plants I once gave her, the SUV I helped put a deposit on sitting in the garage, and saw it all for what it was, a worn-out stage play I'd finally learned how to walk off of. That evening, when I checked my phone, there were 17 missed calls from Abigail. I didn't answer a single one. There was a message from my mom. "What are you doing? Are you trying to ruin everything?" I didn't respond. I just opened my email, attached the scanned PDF of the file, and sent it to every relative in my contact list. All the ones who ever asked why I stopped coming to family events, the subject line was simple. In case you ever wondered why I stopped showing up. Tea brew. The next morning, I got a reply from Uncle Lewis in Kansas. "This is complicated, but you are very brave. I hope Ellie grows up in a fairer world." A cousin in Oregon sent one line. "Proud of you." I wasn't hoping anyone would pick sides. I just needed the truth to be seen. Jason closed every financial support account we'd quietly been covering for my family over the years. Phone bills, insurance payments, college help for Abigail's eldest daughter she once asked us to cover for a few months. All of it ended in one afternoon. No explanations, no apologies. Brr. 3 days later, there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole. It was my mother. Her eyes were red, but her gaze still held that same look that always made me feel 10 years old again. part pleading, part blaming. I didn't open the door. Jason stood beside me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. He didn't need to say anything. My mother left a piece of paper in the mailbox. I opened it. It was a card that read, "Thinking of you" on the front. Inside, in her handwriting, "Family is where we forgive each other. Don't let little things destroy blood ties." I quietly took the yellow sticky note from the folder I had prepped the day before and wrote a new line below the words, "That's enough." It's not a little thing when it happens for years. I stuck it onto the card and placed it back in the mailbox to return. That night, for the first time in years, I slept soundly. No dreams, no second guessing, just quiet. And in that quiet, I finally heard something I'd never been allowed to hear as a child. The sound of my own voice, clear and unwavering. Not even 24 hours after I sent the file to the whole family, my phone started buzzing nonstop like a chaotic symphony. The first message was from Abigail. No greeting, just all caps. "What do you think you're doing?" Then came a string of long texts, mixing guilt-tripping, denial, and subtle threats. It was just a joke. "Why are you trying to make me the villain? You just destroyed this family over one silly gift bag. If you don't stop, I'll get a lawyer." Gershki. Then came messages from my parents. My dad's was brief, just one line. "That's enough, Nancy." My mom's was longer, more emotional, but missing the one thing I'd been waiting for my entire life, an apology. She sent an email along with a handwritten letter through the mail with the subject line, "Let the past rest." I opened the envelope while Ellie was napping on the sofa, curled under a knit blanket, holding her favorite teddy bear. Jason was working in the backyard, and for a moment the house was so quiet it felt like it was holding its breath with me. My mother's letter was written on cream-colored stationery with floral borders. Her handwriting still neat and precise, just like when she used to correct my homework in first grade, but the content was all too familiar. An old tune with slightly new lyrics. "Family is never perfect, but it's the only place to turn when everything else falls apart. You're cutting off the most valuable bond you'll ever have. You can't keep holding on to petty grudges from the past. Think of Ellie. She needs her grandparents, her aunts and uncles, her cousins." The final line closed with a warning disguised as love. "If you don't come back, someday Ellie will blame you for taking her family away." I don't know what I expected when I opened that letter. Maybe an acknowledgement, a brief moment of honesty, a touch of conscience, but all I got was the same echo I'd heard for years, where every wrongdoing was covered in sugar and labeled family. I sat down, pulled a blank sheet of paper and a black marker from the drawer. No long speech. I simply wrote, "I used to miss my family too." I folded it, placed it in the old envelope, and mailed it back. No signature, no explanation. A few days later, I found out Abigail had written a long Facebook post complaining about a family member who out of pride aired private matters online to ruin someone's reputation. The comments were flooded with support, mostly from her close friends. Some even tagged me saying things like, "You don't choose your family, but you can learn to forgive. Sisters shouldn't turn against each other over a little misunderstanding." I said nothing, but a few hours later, a cousin from Minnesota, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, messaged me privately. "If what you wrote in that file is true, she owes you more than just an apology. I don't know how far this will spread, but I do know one thing for sure. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel wrong for standing up for myself." One late weekend afternoon, while I was arranging flowers in the kitchen, Ellie ran in from the backyard. Hands muddy, hair messy, eyes shining. She shouted, "Me and Zoe built a whole tent out of towels. Want to see?" I nodded and smiled, setting the scissors down. "I always want to see what you create." As we walked into the yard, I remembered something my mother once told me after I got a low grade in math as a kid. "Don't let people see where you're weak. They'll use it against you." But now I've learned something else. When you know where you're vulnerable, you know how to protect yourself. And more importantly, I'm teaching that to Ellie. Every day with the unconditional love I never received. As summer gave way to the early winds of fall, Ellie began to change in a way I couldn't quite name but felt deeply. She laughed more. Not the kind of laugh that seeks approval, but light, unburdened laughs, like she could finally breathe in a space that belonged to her. She made 2 new friends in her Tuesday afternoon art class. Lena and Joy, 2 girls from the neighborhood who also loved finger painting and traded friendship bracelets every week. I stood quietly at a distance, watching as Joy tied a green yarn bracelet onto Ellie's wrist. Her eyes lit up like she just won a medal. No one there told her she was too sensitive or needed to toughen up, and I knew she was growing up in a safer world than the one I knew. We hung paper lanterns all around Ellie's room, warm, soft light that replaced the old nightlight my mother once said would make a child's nerves weak. I let Ellie pick out new bedding, pastel swirls like watercolor because she said it looked like the sky after it rains. I bought a new bookshelf for the living room, and for the first time in years I placed a photo of the three of us, me, Jason, and Ellie, right in the center. No more pictures of my parents or Abigail, not out of anger but because I had let go. At night, Ellie and I read books together. Some nights, she reads to me stumbling, but full of confidence. Some nights she asked me hard questions. Mom, have you ever been scared? Why don't adults say sorry when they're wrong? I didn't dodge anymore. I told her the truth even if it was just a nod and a quiet yes. I used to be scared, but not anymore. One Saturday afternoon, while I was wiping down the kitchen counter, my phone rang. The screen showed Abigail. I wasn't planning to answer, but then a text popped up right after. 6 words, shorter and colder than any long speech. Are you happy now? You won. I read the message 3 times, not because I didn't understand, but because I was checking if I felt anything. Did it hurt? Was I angry? Was I satisfied? I felt nothing at all. Because I didn't win. This was never a competition. There was no winner, no loser. There was just me. A mother who finally did what I once wished someone had done for me as a child. Step in, protect, and not look back. I locked the screen. Didn't reply. That evening, Ellie skipped into the kitchen holding a new drawing. She had painted a small house surrounded by a rainbow garden, with 3 stick figures holding hands in front, a long-haired one, a bearded one, and a smiling child. On the roof, she'd written "Where I get to be myself." I pinned it on the fridge right next to the weekly meal plan and scribbled work notes. It was an ordinary moment, but to me, it was a miracle. A few weeks later, Ellie was invited to speak at her school's family day, where each student picked one loved one to sit beside them while they read something they'd written. She chose me. Her piece was only 3 sentences long. Home is where I'm trusted and loved. My mom is my home, and that's where I feel safe. I tried not to cry, but the tears still came, not from pain, but from relief. That night, when Jason took us out for ice cream, Ellie asked, "Mom, if Aunt Abigail texts you again, will you be mad?" I smiled, gently brushing her hair. "No, I won't be mad, but I don't need to reply either because sometimes the strongest thing we can do is stay silent and keep living well." Ellie nodded, then whispered, "I want to live well too, just like you." I turned to Jason and caught his quiet smile. The kind of smile from someone who knows deep down that we did the right thing. In the soft calm of the car driving through the night, I realized I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need someone to say Nancy was right, because I already had the clearest proof. A child growing up with trust, safety, and unconditional love. That night, after Ellie had fallen asleep, I sat alone in my home office. The soft yellow light from my desk lamp cast a glow on old sticky notes, calendar pages marked with red circles, therapy appointments, parent-teacher meetings, the day of that unforgettable birthday party. Everything was behind us now. Life for me and Ellie had become peaceful, measured in small moments. Her laughter in the kitchen while baking cookies, the soft gurgle of water from the little fish tank Jason had just set up, the warm shimmer of paper lanterns each night. But in the quietest moments like this one, something still crept in. A question like a silent shadow. Did I do the right thing? I won't deny that cutting ties with my own family was the hardest thing I've ever done. There were nights I lay awake, not out of regret, but out of ache. I wondered if I had explained more, if I had cried in front of them, if I had pleaded, would they have changed? Should I have reacted more strongly at the party? Called it out in front of everyone, protected Ellie with a bold public stand? Or was walking away in silence the strongest thing I could have done? I chose not to speak, not because I was weak, but because I'd been through enough endless arguments. I didn't need to win a small fight when what I wanted was a lifetime of peace for my daughter. Sometimes I think about my mother, about the things she never said, about how she told me, "Don't make things messy. Instead of asking, "Are you okay?" I think about my father, always silent, never stepping in, even when his eyes flickered during Abigail's jabs at dinner. He knew, but he chose silence. I don't want Ellie to grow up in a world like that, a world where silence is mistaken for peace and expressing emotions is seen as too much. I once read somewhere, some families aren't meant to be preserved, they're meant to be let go. And when I see Ellie painting without trembling, making friends without looking down, smiling without checking for approval, I know I wasn't wrong, but that doesn't mean it's been easy. There are still moments of doubt. I still wake from dreams of family dinners where Abigail doesn't mock me. My mother genuinely asks how I am, and my father holds my hand and says, "I'm sorry." Dreams so vivid that for a few seconds after waking, I forget they never happened and maybe never will. I look out the window, the shadows of trees swaying beneath the soft streetlight. I think of all the mothers out there holding the same question I've held. Am I doing the right thing by saying enough? By stepping out of the cycle of excuses labeled family? I don't have a perfect answer. I can't choose for you. But I can say this. I was once a child who was overlooked, shaped by other people's expectations, forced to be sweet, quiet, tolerant, and I carried that through my whole childhood. I can't change my past, but I can change Ellie's future. So, if you're reading this, if you've lived something similar, if you're standing at the edge between family tradition and the emotional safety of yourself or your child, I want to ask, if it were your child, would you do what I did? Would you stay out of fear of being labeled ungrateful? Or would you walk away to plant a new generation that never had to learn how to endure? Would you choose silence, or would you break the cycle with a scream, a letter, or simply one step away without looking back? I don't have the perfect answer. But I have Ellie, a child growing up without having to hide her tears, without fear of being called too much, without needing to earn love, and for me that's enough to know I'm on the right path. What about you? My story isn't just about a party, a gift bag, or a few hurtful words. It's about the courageous journey to end a generational cycle of silence and pain. I chose to walk away from blood ties that no longer nurtured us, to build a home that was truly safe for my daughter. Maybe I didn't win in other people's eyes, but I chose what was right for my heart. Because happiness doesn't come from keeping the whole family together. It comes from protecting what truly matters, the peace of your child.